Chefs, I've been cooking, because we've got our next budget tournament coming up on the 7th of December, and I'm quite excited for it. In case you aren't familiar, every couple of months I host a commander tournament, a budget tournament, where all decks must cost €50 or less. These tournaments are always a ton of fun, and I tend to build a lot of decks leading into it to find what I'm gonna play for that particular competition. And well, I've been cooking some nonsense. I've been cooking nonsense. What I'm telling you about today is complete madness. But weirdly, it works. That's the beautiful thing about Budget Commander. Pretty much anything can work. Although, again, we might be cooking a little bit too hard today. I have two decks that I want to show you today. Both of them are quite extreme in how they work and what they are trying to do, but I think that's what makes them fascinating. I'm not planning on playing these in the tournament, I just built them, tested them, was weirdly happy about how well they worked, and then also slightly disgusted with myself for what I have created. And now I'm going to share this madness with you as well. Let's start with our mono blue Vinnovix Verbose Host deck. Vinnovix Verbose Host is a 2-mana 0/4 that starts our engines. When our engines get started, we get speed. Our speed starts at 1, and whenever on our turn we deal damage to an opponent for the first time, it increases by 1, up to 4. Once we're at 4, we have reached max speed. Vinnovix also gives us no maximum hand size, and if we are at max speed and we would draw a card, we draw 2 cards instead. That's kind of a crazy line of text. Simply drawing double cards is very powerful. Now, if you know me, then you know that I am obsessed with looters. Cards like Looter Il-Kor, Shoreline Looter, and Malcolm Alluring Scoundrel. I love these stinky little creatures that you can just throw down on the board, smack people with, filter out your hand, and just make sure you have a nice, smooth game. The looters are pretty powerful in their text. They're often unblockable or have some kind of nice evasion, and they tend to come with some additional benefit, like Shoreline Looter eventually drawing us a card and Malcolm eventually winning us the game. But they're still very fair creatures, mostly because, well, they're not actually building card advantage. But with Vinnovix, they do. That's mostly why I built this deck. I wanted to maximize the use I can get out of my looters. But first, we need to get max speed. For that, we play a whole bunch of 1-drop creatures, evasive 1-drop creatures, like Triton Shorestalker, Harrier Strix, or Spectral Sailor. We throw one of these down on turn 1, and then on turn 2, we play Vinnovix. Starting our engines, we smack somebody and are immediately at speed 2. From there, we just continue hitting people, making sure that we build up speed every single turn until we reach max speed on turn 4. At this point, we hopefully have a looter already in play, and that looter can then immediately use its effect to draw us 2 cards instead of just 1. I already like the looters so much when they just cycle, but when they start going card positive, oh my, that is nasty. Especially when we consider how many of these actually exist. Of course, we have the combat looters, but also the tap looters like Merfolk Looter or Fort Courier. Then we have the synergy looters like Uncta's Grand Metattack, which loots whenever a creature becomes tapped, or Windrider Wizard, which loots whenever we cast a spell. We've got the nasty ones like Baral, Chief of Compliance, which loots whenever we counter a spell, or Duelist of the Mind, which loots whenever we commit a crime. You get the point, there are tons of these, and with Vinnovix, we can make sure that they all generate card advantage. We can lean into this even more though, by using Coastal Piracy and Reconnaissance Mission. These cards make it so that whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to an opponent, we draw a card. Well, we already have our evasive looters and our evasive 1-drops that we use to get speed. All of a sudden, when we smack an opponent, we draw 2 cards for each creature that we use to do so. At this point, we're digging incredibly deep into our deck at quite the rapid rate, and hopefully we can find Teferi's Ageless Insight, which makes it so that whenever we draw a card, we draw 2. This stacks with Vinnovix, so all of a sudden everything draws 4. Have you ever heard of anything more disgusting than countering a spell while we have Baral, Chief of Compliance, on the board, and as a result we get to draw 4 cards? Thanks to Vinnovix, we can build this absurd card draw engine that allows us to just fill our hand with literally everything we could ever want. We will easily have 15, 20, 25, 30 cards in hand at any given time, and that allows interaction. We can't play Force of Will in Budget Commander because it's more expensive than the budget restriction. Pretty much all of the good free spells are too expensive to be viable in Budget Commander. However, there's a good chunk of free interaction that exists that isn't quite as cost-effective, but still gets the job done. I think the best example here is Foil. Foil is a 4-mana counterspell where we can discard an island and another card rather than pay Foil's mana cost. This is a free counterspell. It just requires us to use a total of 3 cards to do it. Usually that would be incredibly expensive, prohibitively expensive. This is not something that most decks can afford to do. But we have 30 cards in hand. This isn't even a real cost. In all likelihood, we have 10 extra lands to discard anyways, so we might as well pitch them to Foil. The same is true for Commandeer, which lets us gain control of a non-creature spell if we exile 2 blue cards from our hand, or Disrupting Shoal, which is another counter spell, but it requires us to discard a spell that matches the mana cost of the spell we are countering to do so, or March of Swirling Mist, which still has 1 blue in its mana cost, but we can pay for the X cost, which lets us phase out our opponent's board by just exiling blue stuff from our hand. You get the point. These cards would usually be so expensive to use, but in our case, well, we've got a lot of stuff that we can just dump without needing to worry about it. Another powerhouse here is Forbid, which is just a 3-mana counterspell. We do have to pay the mana for this one, but it has buyback. If we discard 2 cards as we cast Forbid, we then get to return it to our hand after it resolves. Imagine Baral in play, Vinnovix, Teferi's Ageless Insight. We forbid something with buyback, discard 2 cards, use 3 for them. Well, Baral draws us 4. And then we discard 1. So we're neutral, but that's still super good. I understand that all of this sounds a little bit like Magical Christmas Land, but keep in mind, the entire goal of the deck is to draw cards. So we are going to find these synergies. This is what it does. Another cool thing about our interaction package is that it can be very specific. For example, Turn-Aside is a 1-mana counterspell that counters target spell that targets a permanent we control. Usually I wouldn't want to play this because it's very easy for it to get stuck in our hand. But, well, first of all, we want stuff that we can pitch anyways, and secondly, if we have enough hyper-specific interaction in our hand, well, then we should be ready for any situation, right? Turn-Aside to counter something that targets us, this spell to counter an instant, Wash Away to counter a spell that wasn't cast from its owner's hand. Of course, these cards aren't terrible. I'm not trying to tell you that these aren't good cards by themselves, but they can sometimes feel a bit limited. They aren't as much though if we just have all of them. Of course, we also just have some regular good stuff into action like Mana Leak, Resculpt, Counterspell, and Snapback, although that one is another pitch spell. Okay, so we have a huge hand, a bunch of stinky looters on the board, and a lot of very inefficient interaction, but we don't really care about the inefficiency because we have enough resources. So how do we win? Well, Laboratory Maniac. How else? Laboratory Maniac wins us the game if we would draw a card while our library doesn't have any in it. And well, we're just trying to dig through it. That's right, this is a Laboratory Maniac deck that doesn't use a combo. We're just trying to get through the entire 99, honestly. Well, kind of honestly. I don't know if you can call this honest, but we're not comboing. We're just trying to draw the deck. And that may sound crazy. That may sound impossible. But let me tell you, this has happened more than once. This has happened a couple of times. Because once the engine is set up, it's really difficult to interrupt it. I also love that I get to use Walking Atlas and Pew Pew UFO very effectively in this deck list. Walking Atlas and Pew Pew UFO are pretty much the same creature, it just taps to put a land from our hand into play. Usually they are not super good because, well, we need a lot of lands in our hand to be able to use them. but I think you get the point. We're gonna have a lot of lands in our hand because we're just gonna have a lot of cards in our hand. And so we can tap these two every single turn to ramp us. This is definitely a deck that wants the game to last a little while. It can't really win by turn 4 or 5. That's not what we're aiming for. Rather, we're gonna try to counter out and interact with our opponents on their important turns, slow them down, and then just make sure that it goes to turn 8, turn 9, and we have all of the cards we need to get there, and then we win the long game. It's a very silly deck, but surprisingly, it works. Funnily enough, it also has quite a bit of high roll potential because of the Raceways and Gingerbread. The Raceways enter and start our engines, and then we can immediately play Gingerbread and smack somebody with it, and then we are turn ahead of our regular schedule. And that is a huge difference. I know that Ether Drift wasn't the most popular set, which I think is kind of a shame. I actually feel like Ether Drift was a lot better than people give it credit for. It was just held back by coming out after MKM and OTJ. But setting that aside, Vinnovix is a crazy powerful card, and I recommend giving it a try. If you're interested in my deck list, you can find it on my Patreon. There's a link down in the description. Oh, and if you enjoyed the video so far, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, would definitely appreciate it. Vinnovix is all about playing as many cards as possible. Our next deck is kind of the opposite of that. No, it's not Rule of Law. It's Lumra, Bellow of the Woods. Now imagine there's gonna be two responses to me calling out Lumra. The first is, yeah, Lumra is a crazy powerful creature. And the second one is, Baumi, Lumra is like 20 bucks. How are you gonna play that in budget? And to you, my friends, I say, well, first of all, Lumra is only 18 bucks. And secondly, don't forget that all of the combo pieces are also extremely expensive. So to build Lumra, there are a certain number of cards that we definitely need. Otherwise, the deck just won't really function. We need Sylvan Safekeeper and Zoran Orb to be able to sacrifice our lands. We need Horizon Explorer and Spelunking to make sure that our lands enter untapped, and Tireless Provisioner as a bit of a backup there. And we need Nature's Rhythm to be able to tutor stuff out of our deck, even if Nature's Rhythm gets milled into our graveyard. And then we also need Sun-Scorched Desert and Mirror Pool to actually get a game-winning combo. All in all, these 9 cards are 36 euro. We have 14 euro left to build the rest of the deck. Now, it's not actually that rare that somebody builds a budget commander deck where they spend a lot of money on a small section of the deck, and then the rest of the deck trying to find those big value, big power pieces. At the last tournament, for example, one of my patrons participated, and he brought a Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation deck, which is cool and funny and kind of crazy, because he had to spend half of his deck's budget on Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation. And well, we have 70% of our budget just to make sure we can't even win. How can this possibly work? We're going to need to make some concessions. The first of which is, we don't play any interaction. That may sound silly, and it kind of is, but there's actually a bit of nuance to that strategy. Generally speaking, you want your opponents to use their interactions rather than you using your own, especially in a tournament. Best case scenario, somebody else goes for a win, your opponents interact with them, then you go for a win, and then you can use your own interaction to protect that, and then, well, you win the game. So there's a big strategic element to getting your opponents to use their pieces before you use your own. And of course, in a tournament setting, you can't ever trust anybody. Yes, of course, we are still nice. Yes, of course, we still don't intentionally lie. But if somebody asks you if you have interaction, I mean, why would you tell them? That's just silly. And because of that, you kind of have to assume that they do. And honestly, that's often true. Now, there's also a bit of a meta element to keep in mind here, which is that I published the deck list for the tournament ahead of time, so everybody knows what everybody else is playing. I do that because somebody has to check the price points of the decks, and well, that's me, but I also want to participate in the tournament, so I don't want to have an unfair advantage because I know the deck list and everybody else doesn't, so I just check the price points and then afterwards I publish the deck list for everybody to see. That of course means that people can check our deck lists, and well, in our case, they would be able to tell that there just isn't any interaction in here. And that creates a certain stress on the pot. The other players can't look to us for interaction because there just isn't any in the deck. If somebody goes for a win, well, then they have to be the ones to prevent that. Interaction is kind of a sub-game within Commander, and by refusing to participate, we are reducing the resources of the other players. Of course, this does come with the risk that somebody else can just win before we do, but that's just the risk we are taking. Alright, so what else is in the deck? Well, we have some tutors, shared summons, Code of Calling, Tooth and Nail. We just need to make sure that we can actually find the Sylvan Safekeeper and the Horizon Explorer. Then we have a little bit of graveyard recursion in Peerless Recycling and Timeless Witness. And the rest of it is ramp. It's just ramp. Because we're just trying to get Lumra out quickly. Overall, the deck only plays 36 spells. 63 of the cards in the deck are lands. And 60 of those are forests. That part may also look crazy, but there's actually a logic to it. We need around 60% of our deck to be lands, so that we can do a soft combo leading into our actual finisher combo. If we play less lands than that, it just wouldn't work. Now seems like a good time to tell you what Lumra does. Lumra is a 6 mana mono-green elemental bear with vigilance and reach that is as big as we control lands. And when Lumra enters, we mill 4 cards, and then we return all lands from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Lumra's power and toughness scales with the amount of lands we have, which I'm pretty sure was intended to just kind of be like a big beater. You use Lumra to kill people. But there's actually an interesting bit of nuance there. If we don't have lands, then Lumra dies. And we can use that to our advantage. Alright, so here's the loop. We have Horizon Explorer on play, which untaps our lands when they enter tapped. And then a Sorin Orb, which just lets us sacrifice lands. We tap all of our lands, for 6 mana presumably, and then we sacrifice them so they're in our graveyard. At that point we play Lumra. Lumra immediately dies. We don't have any lands, so state-based actions happen and Lumra dies. We then move Lumra right back into the command zone. Then we have Lumra's trigger. We mill 4 cards and put all of the lands from our graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. Because our deck has such a high density of lands, we hopefully hit 2 additional lands, ideally more than that. And this is why it's important that more than 50% of our deck is lands, ideally around 60%. That density means that on average we're adding a little bit more than 2 lands into the loop every time we do it, which allows us to pay for Lumra's command attacks and also save a little bit of mana for the future. So now we just do that same song and dance. We tap all of our lands, we sacrifice them, we play Lumra again. Lumra enters, dies, goes back into the command zone, and we add more lands back onto the battlefield. This allows us to just dig through our entire deck, until we eventually find Sunscorched Desert and Mirror Pool. Mirror Pool is a land that we can sacrifice to put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of target creature we control. Once we have Mirror Pool, we don't want to sacrifice all of our lands anymore because we actually want to keep Lumra on the board. Instead of sacrificing every land to kill Lumra, we now just sacrifice the Mirror Pool to create a token copy of Lumra, which will then have the ETB. Yes, that copy will immediately die to the legend rule, but that doesn't matter. We only need 1 Lumra on the board. That ETB triggers, mills more cards and reanimates our lands again. Importantly, because Mirror Pool sacrifices itself, it will then come back onto the battlefield, and because of the Horizon Explorer, it enters untapped. Then we just need to make sure that before this, we sacrificed enough lands to activate the Mirror Pool again, and now we can just go through our entire deck and endlessly loop all of the lands out of our graveyard. As we go through our deck this way, we will find our Sunscorched Desert, which is a land that when it enters, pings target player for 1 damage. Then we start sacrificing the Sunscorched Desert into the loop, and then we can infinitely ping everybody until they're dead. It's weird how effective this strategy is. It really feels like it shouldn't work, but it kind of does. One of the nice advantages we have here is that we can just cast Lumra in the early game instead of going for a combo right away and use Lumra to ramp and also be a blocker and a beater. Turns out just having a 10-10 commander on the board with vigilance is quite scary and is genuinely a huge threat. The additional mana we get from Lumra also gives us the opportunity to go for quite expensive tutors and to just kind of spam our other ramp. Now, does this deck just straight up fold to interaction? Yeah, probably. That sounds about right. If our opponents can interrupt our combo while we're doing it, we're probably cooked. Because worst case scenario, we'll end up with a Lumra that we can never cast again. But that's just a risk we're willing to take. In the end, this is a weird kind of turbo deck. It's a very toxic deck in that way, where it just doesn't really interact with the table whatsoever. And instead, it just has its own game plan. It tries to get there as quickly as it can, and it tries to get there as resiliently as it can. But at the end of the day, if you got it, you got it. But if we got it, we win. I originally built this deck as a joke, as a meme. I never thought it could be even mildly good. But as I've been testing it, I am now scared to share this information with you. Because I don't want somebody to show up with this tournament and spank my ass with it. It's just such an anomaly on the battlefield. How do you play against a deck that is just trying to brute force its own game plan with complete disregard for everybody else, but doesn't really do it in a way that a lot of decks can safely interact with? Also, what do you do about the 15-15 bear that's coming at your face? I really want to stress this point. In budget Commander, having a 15-15 commander on the board with Vigilance is genuinely a huge deal and a huge threat. That thing will two-shot people. Honestly, if the game goes on long enough and we get to slam a Genesis wave, one-shotting isn't out of the picture either. You might think you can just kill the bear, but keep in mind, when we play the bear, we are almost guaranteed to generate more mana than we need to recast it. So killing the bear actually just sort of ramps us, and then that interaction is used and can't be used for somebody else who might be going for a win as well. I honestly don't know what to make of this one. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody shows up to this with the tournament and genuinely just stomps through the early rounds. But I also wouldn't be surprised if somebody shows up and just doesn't get anything done. This one is definitely a feast or famine type of build. And that's why I wanted to share it with you, because it's truly just wild and out there and bizarre, and that's what today is about. I am really looking forward to the next budget tournament. It's gonna be exciting. It's always so exciting to see all of the different ideas and concepts that people come up with. I've already decided on my commander. It's not either one of these, but I will not share who it is because I know a lot of people in my local community like watching these videos. And I don't want to make it too easy. Gonna need to figure that one out some other way. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. We'll definitely appreciate that. Don't forget to check out my Patreon. You can also find both these deck lists on there. There's a link down in the description. And, well, I'll see you guys soon. Goodbye.